Well, thanks all of you for coming today to help us celebrate the 50th birthday of the River Terrace Church organ, an organ that Lori and I are very fond of, and appreciate your sharing this happy occasion with us. So I'm going to start with a question for you, and that is, how many pipes do you think the organ has? Any ideas? Anybody? Did I hear a guess? If you look at the first two pieces of music I'm playing, the prelude I just did, do they give you an idea of what a less than number could be? 1,000. Less than 1,000. Excellent. Excellent. Now, how much less? That's the key question. Okay, I'll tell you. We have 977 pipes in this organ. We are 23 short of 1,000. And I picked these first two songs to help you remember that, because if you can remember almost 1,000, then you remember how many pipes we have here in this wonderful River Terrace Church organ. The first piece that I just played, Oh That I Had 1,000 Voices, to praise my God with 1,000 tongues. This is a piece a hymn that I became acquainted with way back when I was in my teens and just starting to play for church at Boston Square Christian Reformed Church in Grand Rapids, Michigan. I came across this hymn and I thought, for anybody who leads music in a worship service, it could be a theme song. And it's kind of been my theme song through my life. Let me read some of these words to you. Oh, that I had 1,000 voices to praise my God with 1,000 tongues. My heart, which in the Lord rejoices, would then proclaim in grateful songs to all, wherever they might be, what great things God has done for me. All creatures that have breath and motion, that throng the earth, the sea, the sky, come share with me my heart's devotion. Help me to sing God's praises high. My utmost powers can never quite declare the wonders of God's might. And then this prayer. Creator, humbly I implore you to listen to my earthly song until that day when I adore you, when I have joined the angel throng and learned with choirs of heaven to sing eternal anthems to my King. There's another almost 1,000 song that we know, and that's Oh for 1,000 Tongues to Sing. And so let's sing it. If you want to keep your mask on while we sing, that's okay. I know some people here want to be really careful about that. I know there aren't that many of us, but I think I'll play kind of loud because I have almost 1,000 pipes. Why not use them, right? So the answer to the question, how many pipes the organ has, is almost 1,000. Almost 1,000. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the history of the organ here, the Schanz organ. Back in the late 1960s, in all the commotion of the church, First Christian Reformed Church relocating from Marshall Street over here to the River Terrace address, one of the things that came up was that the church people wanted a new organ for the new church. Now, 2 years ago, we celebrated the 50th anniversary of the church being in this location. But at that point, the organ was not yet installed in the church, so that took a little longer. To organize getting an organ for the church, a committee was set up, and Reen Kamiga was the chair of the committee. She's the mother of Donna Odie, some of you know Donna. Lois Bykirk, Shirley Hoxbergen, Nell Veenstra, and Richard Weber were on this committee. And I contacted Nell and Shirley to see what they remembered about that. And the short answer is not much, although both of them are totally compos mentis, both in terms of past. They remembered a lot of other stuff, but not much about that committee. But you know, that was okay because I found some minutes from a council meeting where Reen gives a report. And let me read these to you. This happened on June 30, 1969. Mrs. Cy Kamiga reported to the consistory about the organ committee's activities to date. The committee, after carefully analyzing the merits of both the electronic and the pipe organs, and after consulting several organ specialists, Dr. Hammersma at Calvin College, Dr. Arnold at Michigan State University, among others, and after studying the specifications of many electronic and pipe organs, and after listening to many organs in central and western Michigan, recommends the Schanz pipe organ at 15.5 ranks as the organ most suitable to our new church. The Schanz Organ Company has increased its price 10% on June 1, 1969, but the salesman has been able to get a smaller increase for us as follows. The 15.5 rank organ, formerly $31,387, now $31,950. Same report says a good electronic organ would cost $20,000, but the committee didn't recommend an electronic organ. The Schanz organ would take 26 months to build. So after this report, Mr. Jack Bolt moved the consistory recommend to the congregation the purchase of the 15.5 Schanz organ, 15.5 rank Schanz organ at $31,000+, and it was approved. The following June 14, it went to a congregational meeting, and they approved the purchase. And so on June 15, there was a short council meeting, and at that council meeting, Mr. Bossenbrook, Arlen that is, moved we enter into a contract with the Schanz Organ Company to purchase the 15.5 rank organ at $31,950 as approved by the congregation and so on. And so the organ was ordered. At the same time as they ordered this organ, they also approved the purchase of a interim organ, like electronic organ, for no more than $3,000 to cover those 2 years until the pipe organ could be installed. When the organ was finally installed, it cost a little bit more. There was some things that had to be adapted in the organ chambers and so forth, and it ended up costing a little bit over $35,000. And Lori talked to Don Hahn, our organ tuner, about what it would cost to replace it today, and that is, the figure was $300,000. So while we're not talking about a king's ransom, we're talking plenty of money. To compare a little bit, the $35,000, in 1975, Bill and I bought a little brick bungalow in East Lansing, and we paid that same amount for our house. So, like I said, it was a fair amount of money to pay. So the organ was ordered, and the 2 years of waiting began. In 1970, Bill and I moved into this area, and one of the first things we did was stop here at, well, it was First Christian Reformed Church then, but it's always River Terrace to me. We stopped here, and Reverend Hoxbergen gave us a tour of the church, and what I remember most about that tour was he showed us the organ, the electronic organ, but he announced so proudly that a pipe organ had been ordered and it would be coming in the following year. And so it did. In December of 1971, December 12, there was a note in the bulletin that the organ was being installed and that the electronic organ used in the interim was for sale. And then the following week, December 19, was the first week that the organ was used in a service here at River Terrace Church. Now, I was at that service, and I don't know, how many others of you, do you remember being here? Anybody else? Ooh, okay, great. Old Leonard's, I know, because I had rides to church with you. Well, I remember such peculiar things about that service, but I know I was there. The first thing I remember, you can kind of see from the front of your program, and that is getting this pipe organ here was a big deal. And yet when you came into church on that Sunday, the front of the church looked exactly the same. You could not see the organ. You could not see the organist unless the organist had a bouffant hairdo or was very tall. You could not see the pipes. And so this kind of momentous thing had happened, but ironically, you couldn't see it. And the only other thing I remember about that service, and why, the choir sang this little Christmas cantata, and it had a beautiful tenor solo in it. And a fellow by the name of Leon Ballast, and I remember this, I didn't have to look anything up. He sang that solo, and I not only remember the solo, I remember the words to it. So I feel a little reluctant to claim that I played for that service because my memory is so erratic. I might have been in the service, maybe I sang in the choir with Renee, I don't know. But anyway, I do remember that about the service. But there have been many organists that have played in this church over the years, so I must not claim what is not mine. Lori plays, Lois Bykirk played for many years. We had Cheryl Vandehar playing, Jan Baker, Tim Quist, Bev Brower, Paula Limburg. There have been other organists, so it's not all mine to claim by any means. So anyway, we had the service, the organ was installed. The first of the year in 1972, it was fine-tuned. February, we had a dedication service with Dr. John Hammersmith coming from Calvin, playing for that service. And I remember it was a wonderful service with lots of songs played that's in a way that Lori's going to do in a little bit, that showed some of the different voices and features of the organ. And so it began the service of the organ for many years, very often 2 services a Sunday, sometimes 3, lots of memorial service, lots of weddings, special services, holidays. The church organ really got a workout. And after 20 years, the music program too was increasing and growing and diversifying too as more contemporary music came into the church. So in 1991, the sanctuary was redone, and the platform area was changed quite dramatically. If you know, the screen in front of the organ, that went away. The organ was moved over here, so finally we could see what was going on without somebody in the back of the church going like this to cue us. The choir loft went from 2 rows of pews to 3 rows of chairs. Those 2 big pulpits that were fondly called the chariots, those disappeared. And the piano, which had been down on the pew on the floor level, the piano was moved up onto the platform, reflecting, I think, the more interesting contemporary music and the praise and worship style of music. When it was down on the floor, the acoustics weren't very good for it down there, and plus it was really hard to follow the sight lines for anything that you might need it for with the choir and so forth. So the piano came up, and so it was a new day at River Terrace Church. And that year, 1991, we also started having praise and worship services for the evening service. In 1992, when the organ was 21, Wendy Hoffman, who was directing the choir, and I got to be in our bonnets that we would celebrate the coming of age of the organ. It was 21 years old. I think part of the problem was we were going to do 20 years, but we all got busy with other things. So anyway, we had a Sunday evening service where we celebrated the organ, we celebrated the choir, we had a trumpet, we did lots of hymns because that's what we love to do. And it was a really nice service. The theme of the service was from the hymn, Holy God, We Praise Your Name. And from morn till set of sun, through the church, the song goes on. That song talks about how all the saints and angels and cherubim and seraphim and Church Universal are joining to praise God. The 3rd verse of that song has special meaning for River Terrace Church because it begins, Lo, the apostolic train joins thy sacred name to hallow. And anybody who spent any time in this church, especially in the pre-air conditioning days, knows that because we are so close to that railroad crossing on Hagedorn, that busy crossing, that almost every worship service, a trained whistle joined its voice to the congregation. Now, it might not have been the apostolic train, But it was definitely a train. And to this day, you can still hear the train. In fact, choir rehearsal this week, you know, we noticed it. And, you know, you just kind of back off and wait a minute till it gets by. So that was 1992. A few years later, the church was greatly added on to and air conditioning installed. So we could close doors and windows in the summer, and it was, the temperature was more modulated, and so we didn't hear the train quite so much. We could practice without freezing or boiling because the temperature in the sanctuary was much better. And also, about that time, we could start doing piano and organ together because they didn't fluctuate so much with warm and cold, and we could stay in tune together a little bit at that time. And so it continued. We played and sang for many years and enjoyed the music at River Terrace Church until March 2020 when everything went silent. And it was a part of the COVID shutdown. And I know I would come into the church on Sunday afternoons when I knew nobody would be here, and I'd play the organ sometimes for hours just to restore my soul. And also, somehow this place needed to know that the music was still alive. This is the Lord's house. I don't know. It's hard for me to describe it. I just felt an obligation to come here and fill this place with music. Even if I didn't have your voices, at least we had the organ. So here we are today. Lori's bringing the organ back. The service styles may change, but Lori's got plans to use the organ, and we plan to be here for a while. So, Lori, may I turn it over to you to talk a little bit about the organ?
Okay, thanks, Kathy. That was great. And just one thing about the photo on the front, I have to give credit. My husband took that photo actually in 1980 when we were both grad students here. We actually met when we were grad students here at this church, and I was the organist at that time. So Jack gets credit for that photo. That was not when the organ was installed, but a little bit later. And yes, the organ was behind that partition, right in the middle of things. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the mechanics of the organ. As you know, the organ is referred to as the king of instruments. It's the largest instrument in the world. Many of you know that I also play the carillon in Beaumont Tower at Michigan State University. A lot of carillons are a lot bigger and heavier than most organs. But the biggest instruments in the world and heaviest are organs. The largest one in the world is the Boardwalk Hall Auditorium organ in Atlantic City, New Jersey. Ours has almost 1,000 pipes. That organ has 33,000 pipes, 449 ranks, and 7 manuals. So ours is very small compared to that. Anyway, let me give you a little bit of information about the organ. It's made up of 3 parts. One is the console, where I'm sitting now. Of course, that's where the organist plays and controls the different sounds and the volume at the console. Another is the blower. That provides the wind into the pipes. Our blowers are behind these walls in the front. And then the third part is the organ chambers. That's where the pipes are, the pipe chambers. And we have 2 on the left side of the cross there and on the right side. So we have 2 organ chambers, both of which are under expression. And Kathy's going to talk about what that means a little later. The pipes are made of a lot of different materials and different sizes and shapes. Some are metal, most of them are metal, some are wood. The metal is primarily tin, and that makes the best sound, but it's very expensive, so they often mix it with lead. So there's tin and lead. Some of the pipes have kind of a mottled appearance, and that's because of the lead mixed into them. So we have pipes on both sides. If you look at this diagram on the screen, and it's also inside your program, on the very bottom is the blower, and then it shows the air coming up through the pipes that are standing there. I'm not going to go into details about that. It's so complicated, I don't really understand it well enough to explain it. But I do want to talk about the two different kinds of pipes that you see. And so if you look on the upper left corner, you see two pipes. The one on the right is a flue, F-L-U-E, a flue pipe. And flue pipes, the air comes in through the bottom, a hole called the toe hole. There's also a slit called the mouth, and then the air goes up through the pipe. The shape and size of the split, or the slit, the mouth, determine the sound of the pipe. And pipes are made to kind of imitate different instruments. We have some that are strings, some that are flutes, some that are reeds. And so the shape of that pipe makes a difference. The wider pipes sound more like flutes. The middle-sized pipes are like principals, and principal are our foundation stops. And the narrower pipes are strings. So the quality of sound in the flues is determined by that. The pitch of the sound is determined by how long the pipe is. Of course, a longer pipe makes a deeper, lower sound, and a shorter pipe makes a higher sound. So those are the flues, and by far most of our pipes are flues. Most of them are metal, but we have some wood pipes in there too. There are also stopped pipes, which means they're closed at the other end. So that way they sound lower because the air has to travel up and back down again. So it's equal to a pipe that would be twice as long, but it's because it's stopped at the top. The other type of pipe, which is on the left on the screen or in your diagram, is a reed pipe. And those pipes have little metal reeds in them that vibrate and actually make the sound. Kind of like if you play a clarinet or an oboe, you have a reed in your mouth. They're not metal, but they vibrate. So the reed pipes make that sound, and they have a very different quality, and I'll demonstrate that all in just a minute. I'm going to talk next about the manuals, and I think you can see on the camera a little bit of what I'm going to be pointing to. For your information, Mark is also recording this, and eventually it's going to be on our YouTube channel. And the camera he's using for that can zoom in, so you might be able to see details even more closely than you can see right now on this camera. So here I am at the console, and we have two manuals because they're played with your hands, and we have the pedals. Organs have two or more manuals. Most have two or three, and they're standard names. The upper one here is called the swell. The lower is called the grate. And if there were a third down here, it would be the choir. If there are more, then they have different names. But we have a swell and a grate. The manuals have 61 keys. Compare that to a piano that has 88 keys. So this is not quite as long. This is 5 octaves. And there are 32 pedals. So that's what we play with. Each of the manuals is connected to a set of pipes that kind of go together. In our organ, and I should say too, one thing unique about the organ is they're all different. You know, if you play a violin, most violins are made the same, very similar. Same thing with the piano. It might be a grand or an upright, but they're the same. Organs are each very different. Different stops, different constructions, so none is exactly alike. In our organ, the swell pipes are in the right chamber here, and the grate pipes are in the left chamber. The pedal pipes are divided between the two chambers. And you'll get to hear all this in just a second. So each manual controls this set of pipes that sound good together. In order to make the sound, now I've got the organ on, Kathy was playing it, but if I play the keys, are you hearing anything? You can see I'm playing them, I think. It's because I don't have any stops on. Somebody said it's really handy if you want to practice during the sermon because they can't hear you, but we don't do that. Even when the organ was hidden behind the screen, we didn't do that. But So in order for there to be sound, I have to choose stops. A lot of organs have stops that are knobs on the sides that you pull out. So the expression, pull out all the stops, that's where it comes from. You're literally pulling out everything and you get the biggest sound. Our organ has our stops on these tabs or levers over the manuals. So when I depress a stop, that allows air to flow to that rank of pipes connected to that. So then I can play. And we have many stops. I'm going to go through that a little bit and show you how it works. If you look in the middle of your program, it talks about the different voices. And so I'll be going through those. Principals are the foundation. We have strings, flutes, and reeds. So I'm going to show you what they each sound like. On the back of your program is the actual listing of the stops we have. And since the camera can't zoom in well enough for you to read what's on here, you can look at that and know exactly what I'm talking about. So I'm going to start out with the principals, our foundation stops. We have those on our grate manual and our pedal, and they're all in the chamber on the left side. And then just one detail about the length of the pipes. On these stops, it says the name of the stop and it tells the length. So you see some are 16 foot, some are 8 foot, 4 foot. An 8-foot stop means the largest pipe in that rank is 8 feet long. And the 8-foot stops sound at the same pitch as a piano. If I play middle C with an 8-foot stop, and you played middle C on the piano, it would be the same pitch. A 4-foot stop is half as long, and that'll be an octave higher. Here's my 4-foot stop. I'm playing the same note, but a 4-foot stop. A 2-foot stop is an octave higher again, same note. And a 16-foot stop would be an octave lower. So let me first play an 8-foot principal on the pedal. Here's the 8-foot. Same note, here's the 16-foot. So, you know, I've played one key and one pedal here, but you've heard all those different sounds. So on the pedal, and if you can see on the camera there, this is saying pedal. These are all the stops for the pedal. I have a 16-foot, an 8-foot, and a 4-foot principal. If I play them all together, and on the grate, which is over here, I have an 8-foot principal, and this is on the back of your program, a 4-foot octave, that's in that family, and a 2-foot super octave. So those are our principals. So let me play something that uses the principals. Of course, if we're going to talk about organ music, we have to start with J.S. Bach, because that's what we think of with organ music. So I'm going to play a chorale prelude using the principals, our foundation stops. This is a setting. A chorale prelude is a prelude based on a chorale or a hymn tune. This one is, "If you but trust in God to guide you." If you but trust in God to guide you, that tune, which we've sung in the past. In this version, the melody is kind of slow. It's about this speed. Underneath that, he accompanies it with faster notes. And this is kind of interesting because Bach used the rhythm of joy, he called it. This is that rhythm. And you'll hear that little figure keep coming back. So that's the rhythm of joy. And in the pedals, there's a stepwise thing called the motive of faith. You know, Bach was a church musician, so that permeated all of his composition. So I'm going to play this chorale with the melody on the top in the longer notes, the rhythm of joy in the middle, and the motive of faith in the bottom. you one more thing with the principals. We also have a stop called a mixture, which kind of goes in the principal family. It actually means 4 pipes are going to play at once. So if I play just, here's my 8-foot stop, here's my mixture. So you got a bunch of things together. So if I add that to my principals, I'll play the second half of that piece with the mixture added. Just gives it a little fuller sound. So there's Bach on the principals. The next family I want to talk about is the strings. We only have 2 string stops on this organ, and they're on the swell manual. You can probably find them on the list because the name gives it away. One is the viol, that's a string, and it sounds like this, 8-foot stop. And the viol celeste. A celeste means the pipe is a little bit out of tune, almost to give a feel like there's a little vibrato to warm up the tune. So here's warm up the tone. Here's the viol celeste. Together. So I'm going to use that to play, let's move to the Romantic era rather than the Baroque like Bach, but and play a piece by Johannes Brahms, his beautiful setting of Lo, How a Rose Ere Blooming. And I love to use the strings for this. I like to have a little fuller sound though, and we only have 2 8-foot string stops. So what I'm going to do is use a coupler. We have lots of couplers on the organ, and the coupler actually enables you to couple stops together. So on the swell manual, I have a 4-foot coupler, which means I can add that, and then it adds the next octave. So here was my strings without anything else. If I add the coupler, but now in this piece, I want to have some of it with the coupler and some without. Of course, I could be turning, pushing it on and off while I'm playing, but I'm too lazy to do that. So I'm going to actually couple the swell stops down to the great so I can have them set up differently. So I can put on a great coupler, swell to great, it's on your list, 8-foot. So now here's my swell. On the great, I don't have any stops pulled, but I have it coupled. Makes the same sound on this one. And I'm going to couple the octave higher to the great as well. And since I mainly play this with my hands, but there's a few notes that are kind of hard to reach, so I'm going to couple it down to the pedal too, so those low ones I can catch with my feet without having to worry about it. So here is Brahms on the strings, and let me add one other detail. We also have a tremulant, which gives a little tremolo to it. So here's my string stop with just plain. See if you can hear the difference if I put the tremulant on. Has that little vibration. So I'm going to put that into just to warm up everything a little bit. So here's Brahms on the strings. So that's an example of the strings. The next family is the flutes, and we have a lot of flutes, and they're really nice. We have flutes on every manual and the pedal. I'm going to start with the swell manual. We have a roar flute, which means pipe flute. We have a 4-foot vault flute, which is a wood, literally means forest flute. It's wooden. A flautino, a little one. In the pedal, I've got a 16-foot flute. Actually, that was the principal. Sorry, here's the flute. Here's the 8-foot. 4-foot. And on the grate, we have a gedakt flute. That gedakt means stopped. So as I talked about before, this was a stopped one. And our quietest one is the Spitz flute. Spitz means pointed. The tops of these pipes are tapered. Here's our Spitz flute. And we have a 4-foot of that too. So we have lots of choices for flutes. In the pieces I played before, the composer didn't tell me what I should play. In this one, there are suggestions, but then you have to work with what you actually have on your organ too. What their suggestions are may not fit with the organ you're playing on. So we're constantly trying different things. I'm going to play just a little bit of a piece by David Sherwin. This is a setting of God Himself is with us. I'm going to start with the flutes and use flutes in the pedal, but when the melody of the hymn comes in, I'm going to use that on the swell with a string sound, just to get some contrast. So you'll hear the flutes and strings. So we get that nice contrast. The melody is on a string stop and the accompaniment is on the flutes. And I want to play one other short piece to demonstrate the flutes. This is a Christmas carol, Bring a Torch, Jeanette Isabella, by Alfred Fedeck. In this one, he says to use an 8-foot flute and a 1-foot flute. Well, we don't have a 1-foot flute, but I can come close to it. If I take my 2-foot flute on the swell and I couple it to the grate an octave higher, then I get a 1-foot flute. So here's the 2-foot on the swell. If I couple it to the grate, it gives me a 1-foot. And then I'll just add some 8-foot flutes on the grate. So now I've got my 8-foot and my 1-foot. And it sounds real fluty. So you can kind of play around to find the registration that you want. We spend a lot of time just choosing a registration. In fact, I could get a 2-foot flute or a 2-foot sound if I use the principal, and I thought of doing that here. I'll show you real quickly. So this would be the same thing with the principal, since I have a 2-foot on that. But I don't like the sound as well. Maybe you'll like it, but this is what it would be. I prefer the nice, makes a little difference, but it does make a difference. So those are all our flue pipes on this organ. The principals, the strings, the flutes, the tremulant, the mixture. The only thing left are the reeds. And we have really one rank of pipes for the reeds, because you'll notice on the list there that some of the stops share pipes, like the Spitz Flute, the 4-foot and the 8-foot, they share pipes. The same thing with the trumpets. The trumpets are reeds. Kathy says they're called the party horn of the organ. They have kind of a pungent sound. So here's our trumpet on the swell. Here's the 4-foot clarion, which is another reed. If I put them together, it's like I'm playing in octaves. And in the pedal, I've got an 8-foot trumpet and a 16-foot contra trumpet. Often we use these for solo stops, and that's what I'm going to demonstrate now. Sometimes we're playing a piece that has the melody in the feet, and you want that, pungent sound. You might use a reed. I'm going to do a trumpet tune where it's in the hands, on the swell. We also use the trumpet for congregational singing. For congregational singing, we use a combination of lots of different pipes. But if there's a verse in a hymn that mentions a trumpet, you can be pretty sure we'll throw the trumpet on, so listen for it. But let me just give you an idea of what it would sound like using the trumpet stop as a solo in this trumpet tune by Jeremiah Clark. Since sometimes I want a little beefier sound, maybe for a postlude or something, but I want that trumpet, so I might add some more. I'd add some of the strings or flutes. I might couple it, maybe add a couple of things on the other manuals, and just open it up a little bit more. So this is the march that goes with that trumpet tune, just with a little more oomph to it. So that's kind of a tour of the different kinds of sounds that you can get on the organ. So I'm going to turn it back over to Kathy, and she's going to talk a little bit about how we use it to play for congregational singing. Clear all my stuff out of the way here a minute.
Hymn playing is a big part of what an organist does for a church service. Way back when I was a kid, I would go down to LaGrave Avenue Christian Reformed Church in Grand Rapids once a week for an organ lesson with...
Close the shades so I can turn the lights on.
Okay, right. Anyway, so Mrs. Laniga, Alice Laniga, could give me an organ lesson. And we did the usual stuff with the organ lessons, the box, the recital pieces, all this. But she'd very often open the hymnal, and we would rehearse a hymn. We'd go through each verse, seeing what it might mean, how you could interpret that through your playing. It would, she would talk about the punctuation, the phrasing, and all that. And one time she said to me, if you get anything right in a service, make it the hymns. You know, at that time I thought, that's right, I'll get the hymns right. Now when I look back at it, I think maybe I was having a really terrible lesson. I don't know. But anyway, the hymns are so important, and Lori and I both do try to appreciate all the verses of the hymns. We don't just play that 2 and 3 times. We play the words for each verse of the hymn. So I thought we would sing, I think we have time just to sing 3 verses of The King of Love, My Shepherd Is. And so I'm going to play the first verse that we're singing on the grate and kind of at the 8-foot level and bring down some of the strings and stuff from the swell manual. The second verse has that wonderful text, perverse and foolish, oft I strayed. So I'm going to use a reed for that to give it a little darker sense. I don't want to make it too scary or we'll scare the sheep, but it's going to have just a sense of that particular text. And then on the last verse, just because it's the relief of joyous praise, we'll just have some 4-foot stops on it, make it a little bit bigger. So let's sing The King of Love, My Shepherd Is. And why we do that, Lori is, I don't know, have you done it? Okay, Lori has turned the lights on in the organ chamber, and you should be able to see in there. It's not very pretty. It looks like somebody's basement or a warehouse, but you can't see in there, and you can see the pipes. And also, you can see, I have pedals here that you see how I'm opening and closing those louvers? And when we open and close them, that's how we can control the volume of sound. And a lot of organs have it for the swell manual, and not for the gray, but this organ has it for both, which means you can't see the pretty pipes, but it also means we have a lot more diversity in terms of the volume of the stops that we're using. So let's do The King of Love, My Shepherd Is. Hymns are such a blessing. I love my hymns. I'm going to take a few minutes to talk about the problems and challenges that we've had with the organ, and believe me, this organ has been so reliable that won't take long to talk about problems. Any problems really that I've countered along the way mainly fall into the category of operator error. There's something about getting over here and you lose your mind. I'm only speaking for myself, not Lori, but we have the organ tuner come in twice a year, and that's pretty much, for over these 50 years, all we've needed to keep this organ running. Pipe organs are prone to have something called ciphers, C-I-P-H-E-R-S, kind of like a mystery or code, and that's when a note sticks and you're not always exactly sure why. And we've had a few of those over the years, but I was thinking not much more than maybe a half a dozen. And when they would happen, usually during the week when you're practicing, you call the tuner, he comes out and fixes it. The closer they would get to the worship service, the more tense making it became, because we're planning to use the organ for worship, and we don't want anything to spoil that. I know Lori had quite a loud principal cipher a couple of years ago, and we had to get Brian Fowler out on the Saturday. He was still around. I remember one Sunday morning, maybe 20 years ago, I got here and I turned the organ on, and I heard, it was just on. I didn't have stop sign or anything. To this day, I don't know what happened. But anyway, I knew it was in the swell, and so in sheer, it's a cipher. What am I hearing? So in desperation, I actually climbed into the swell organ loft there, which doesn't look that high until you're up the ladder, and with my shaky hands located the pipe that was squealing and dislodged it so we could use the organ for the service. And just this summer, the end of this summer, I don't know if the dampness got to it, but we did find that we were having some of these low, I hesitate to even play them because they kept getting stuck. Bill Lakos knows about this because he was working with me one Sunday when we finished playing together, and he went, and I'm getting a little deaf and I barely heard it. We were getting some sound from there, and anyway, Lori and I both had some problems with those low notes, which involved doing kind of a duck walk into the corner of the great chamber to dislodge them so they wouldn't play. So we could use the foundation stops without those. Really, though, so few problems with this organ. But we did have, probably about 30 years ago, one big, major problem. And when I talked to Shirley Hawksbergen, she reminded me of it. And when I talked to Don Hahn, our tuner in the spring, he reminded me of it, because never in all his years of tuning organs had he ever come across such a problem as we had here at River Terrace Church. What happened was that practically, overnight, the organ sounded terrible. Some notes just flat out didn't sound. Some sounded all garbled and mixed up, and it was over a wide range of notes, and there was a major problem. So we called Don Hahn, and he came out, and he discovered that someone had dropped candles into the pipes. In the organ loft, organ chamber, were some bins with candles left over from weddings or I don't know what all. Anyway, someone had dropped the candles into a lot of the pipes, and that's why they were sounding so badly. So he spent a great deal of time getting the candles out, checking the whole organ, getting the wax out, tuning everything. It was an expensive repair. I wasn't involved in the detective work, but I understand they discovered the perpetrators almost immediately. And the children that committed this act of vandalism, I think vandalism is too rough a term, because actually they were really good kids who had a very naughty day. And so, we all have kids sometime that surprise you with what things they do wrong. But anyway, so I'm going to call it an act of candalism, because give me that. So anyway, the children that committed this act of candalism were identified, their parents paid for the repair, and they grew up to be fine, upstanding citizens. So that was over. But, we never talked about it. There was the word out, don't talk about this, don't tell. Did any of you hear this story? No, because we were silent about it. And because we didn't want any, copycat candleism. So we just kept quiet about it all these years. In fact, when I thought about telling this story here to this group, I don't know. But now I was told that this demographic is not known for youthful hijinks, so we're probably okay. But I have to say, this week I checked in the swell chamber over here, and what to my wondering eyes did appear but a plastic bin with candles in it. So I took them and I hid them. And if any of you need to use a candle for anything, come talk to me. I know who you are, and I want to know why you want to use that candle. We are never having this happen again. So this has been a wonderful instrument for these 50 years, and really that was the only thing, little blip in the landscape. So I'm going to turn it over again to Lori to have some closing remarks and maybe have some have some questions if you have questions.
Kathy, we want names.
You won't get it out.
Not sure if I can move that right now. I'm not saying I have all the answers, but Kathy's here too. But does anybody have a question or something you'd like to know about the organ or something we missed? Yeah. Thank you. I can do that real quickly. So the buttons are pistons, and you can preset those pistons so that when you push one of them, the stops you have selected will immediately come on. When we're playing, of course, a lot of times you want to change stops, and sometimes you can get a hand free to do that, but sometimes you can't, or sometimes there's lots of stops that need to be changed. And so we have pistons. I don't know if you can see that right now, but there's 4 here for the swell manual. When I push them, you'll see these stops change. So they're presets. There's 4 for the grate, same thing. And there's 4 down here for the pedal. They're actually operated by our feet. And then there's 4 general. So like number 3, that's our standard congregational setting for congregational hymns. Usually number 1 is set for something quiet. So those are called pistons, and they're presets. And then there's a very important white button over here called the cancel button, so that you hit that, because it always happens that you've got things on and then you forget to hit, and then you get off the organ, and then that happens. So you have to push the cancel button. Anything else?
There was talk a few years ago about adding more pipes.
There was. The pipe we were considering, or the stop, was an oboe, which is another reed stop, a little bit less pungent than a trumpet. In fact, it would have been a lovely, more mellow reed stop that would be beautiful for solo playing in different pieces. We considered doing that and had Don Hahn investigate it. He had a rank of oboe pipes from another similar organ. It would have cost about $10,000 and would have required some changing of the organ chambers. And at the time, we were dealing with a lot in the church that was in the middle of one of our pastor searches and stuff, and it was just too much to handle at the time, so we did not pursue that, and somebody else got the pipes, so they weren't available anymore. But sometimes we still wish we had a nice oboe. We can use our trumpet and kind of blend it with other things, but it's not quite the same as a nice oboe. But we can always make it work. Anything else? Well, then, we both, here, let me get out of the way, because she's going to come back. We both really thank you for coming. We've had so much fun preparing this, and I know I've learned a lot doing some research about all these things, and so it's been a good experience. As we leave today, Kathy's going to play Bach's setting of Now Thank We All Our God. Thank you so much. So she's going to play that, and I'm going to go over and leave the lights on in that chamber. You can't come out this way right now because the cameras are very sensitive and we don't want to mess those up. But as you walk out, I'm going to have the door open so you can kind of glance in and see the pipes in the chamber in case you haven't seen that before. So again, thanks for coming. Keep enjoying the organ, and on Sunday morning, listen if you can figure out what kind of pipe is that. Is that a reed or is that a flute? Okay, thank you.
I know if Jenny Matheson were here, she would say, thanks for coming. She had to leave early because her dad has some medical issues and needed to quickly go. So just wanted to keep that in mind and say thanks to Jenny. Thank you. And I know she would thank you big time, Mark.
It's been fun for us. So I'll open the door, and just feel free to come out when you're ready. It'll be kind of loud, but that's okay.